There she blows.
There she blows. Folks, welcome back to the Rebels Edge. John Najarian, Pete Najarian, and Jared, our ever-ready producer, who has some surprisingly good stuff for us today. He always has good stuff for us, Pete. But today, some exceptionally good stuff. But let's get this kicked off with the 1 minute macro, because you can only imagine how everybody else in finance, Pete, is probably spending hours and hours and hours talking about, well, do you think Jay Powell's shoes are a little too tight, or maybe his tie is cinched up a certain way? So that means, no, that's not what we're about. But the 1 minute macro is, if interest rates are going up, if the dollar's getting stronger, guess what, Pete? The market's going down.
Yep. And that's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing the dollar go up a little bit higher. It's up a little over 111. You look over at the 10-year, it's a little bit above 4. That gives people an excuse to say, you know what, we're going to sell a little. This is up a little, we're going to sell a little. That inverse relationship is exactly in tune right now. And that's what we're seeing, John. But, you know, that's enough macro already, and we haven't even done a minute. Let's jump into the real stuff.
All right. By the way, speaking of real stuff, I will be joining this gentleman, Charles Payne, for his show, Making Money with Charles Payne. And that'll be pretty fun, Pete, because Charles is a heck of a nice man. Had breakfast with him yesterday. I'll be in studio with him today. And we'll look at things, Pete, like, for instance, the fact that the VIX is down 22% into this Fed meeting. Mm-hmm. Now, if you looked at it where it was versus the last Fed meeting, we were up around 29 3/4, Pete, almost 30. And now we're at 26 and change. So it's a pretty uncertain one. And I think people will really want to, discuss what Jay Powell is likely to do.
Yeah. Well, one last thing I'd say about that topic, John, then we'll jump in. But, you talk about the volatility. How about the fact that we've suddenly seen a market that's a lot more constricted, right? I mean, we were looking at 1,000-point moves in a single day or more. We've been 600-point moves, both up and down. And you look at those highs and lows. We're in a much different place right now. We have really constricted down where it's a lot tighter, couple 100, 300 points, stuff like that. And that's why I think you've seen the volatility start to get crushed down, 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 down. Same thing with the VXN for the volatility of NASDAQ as well.
Yeah, well, let's start, Pete, with some of the big movers of the day, like Chegg, CHGG. Online education. You probably can't remember, folks, the last time you heard us talk about any online education, Chinese or American company, that was actually up. But these guys reported numbers, Pete, that were a lot better than expected, even though they were down about 4% year over year.
Yeah, John, when you look at their balance sheet, the balance sheet looks great. But when you look at their numbers that they put up, and they raised the forecast as well, but the earnings, it was 50% better than expected. They're 21 cents, and they were looking for 14 cents. You look at the actual fundamentals of this company, they look pretty good. And that's why I think you're seeing this kind of a move today. We've got other stocks on the list that they're not quite moving in the same direction, and they're getting hammered pretty good. But this was a very, very nice earnings report. One of the better I've seen in a long time, to be honest.
I agree, Pete. Well, so I think this is one you could dip your toe into, but you don't have to chase it on an up 25% day. I think you could wait until after the Fed meeting and see if you can get it a little cheaper. What about ZoomInfo, Pete? This is not Zoom, the ZM symbol. This is ZI, the symbol for this one. Software company beat Wall Street estimates and raised full year guidance, Pete. But then it was what some of their folks said on the call that was not taken very positively, because he said, we began to see increased macro pressure on deals, causing the level of deal review to increase and elongate further. Basically, people were cutting their targets, Pete, because they didn't think these guys could sustain, and that perhaps they're being a little optimistic about the forward guidance.
Yeah, and John, they were talking about billings. They were talking about that macro side of things. Billings did miss, and that is a bit of a problem. But the deceleration too, John, when you're looking at some of the growth that they were talking about for 2022, growth about 47%. For 2023, about 29%. Still growth, but that direction going down is a reason enough for people to say, you know what? It's been a nice ride. I'm going to get out of here. And that's what people are doing. They're running for the doors because this one, we were just talking about Chegg up about 23 to 26%. This one's down 25%. It's getting hammered pretty good today. So I think, John, when we're looking at this one, what they're looking for from the deceleration side is definitely scaring people off right now.
Yeah, well, Pete, beginning of October, it was more like $50 a share.
Yeah.
Yeah, it had sagged a little, but it's sagging a lot more right now. Down $11.34, 26%, like you say. $32 is where it is. The 52-week low is $30.31. And I think we revisit that quickly, Pete, especially if we get some hawkish comments out of J-Pow. All right, what about Tupperware? I thought this one was interesting, TUP, Pete, because not only is the stock down, but basically they say external challenges are eroding our business. So, I mean, this is not a big expensive thing. It's not like hundreds of dollars for some SaaS, software as a service or anything else. This is, little, $5 plastic things for your food storage and so forth. It's kitchen products.
Yeah.
For these guys to say that the consumer's slowing down that much, that's worth noting.
Yeah. Well, John, they were talking about challenges internally, externally. They were talking about the fact that they missed on the profits. They missed on the revenue. I mean, whatever could go wrong seemed to have gone wrong this last quarter. The earnings a year ago were $1.19. Now they're 14 cents. That's a bit of a problem. You want to talk about deceleration. We were just talking about that. This is this is hitting the brakes as hard as you can with both feet. I mean, it's just unbelievable what they're actually announcing here. By the way, volume's absolutely off the charts, John, about 6.5, 7 times normal. So gives you a little bit of an idea that I'm not just saying people are leaving. They are leaving, and they're going in there and selling and saying, you know what, maybe another time, but this ain't a good time to be holding on to this one.
Yeah. And folks, to give you an idea, if you pull up a 6-month chart, you'll see the last time they had an earnings oopsie like this, the stock was $17. And they kind of gave them a little bit of a pass, Pete, because after falling dramatically, it made a run back. Let's see, what was that most recent high? I guess August, it was around $12.50 again after falling down to like, $6, just getting hammered on that big drop. But to double and go to 12 meant people thought that it was going to be good. Now they're basically saying, well, what are they going to do other than lay people off and stop advertising because, it's a new 52-week low today, Pete.
Ugly.
All right. Well, lastly, this is a stock that I've never mentioned before. I've seen it, but I've never mentioned it. And there's good reason.
Never heard of it.
It's CASBF. It's called CanSino Inhalable. I think that tells you everything you need to know, Pete.
More than I wanted to know. It sounds terrible.
It's an inhalable treatment for COVID.
Since we're wrong there.
COVID treatments are so popular with the whole world right now, as Pfizer and Moderna and the various mRNA type of production slows dramatically. Well, now these guys in China have never taken the mRNA vaccines, but this one's up 80% today, Pete, on hopes that they're going to start taking this like crazy as their, I guess, in order to get out of the jail, in order to leave some of those sweatshops and so forth and travel around in China. I think that the people are tired of being locked down, Pete, but be careful what you wish for with this inhalable COVID vaccine.
Yeah, and I'm sure they've done a lot of great testing on it, John. I'm sure they know all the side effects. I mean, I have no question about it at all. I mean,
no.
First of all, we have the FDA here, right? And they do a terrible job. I mean, they're freaking awful, right? But you go to China and these clowns, are you kidding me? This is it's great that they've got something, right? They're using it in Shanghai. That's fantastic. It will hopefully get some of the reopening and some of the restrictions kind of loosened up a little bit, all of that. But the after effects, and nobody likes to talk about that, John, but that's something that I think, I sit there looking at this thing and hearing this storyline and seeing this stock make this, unbelievable move to the upside. And I'm thinking, wow, how many people out of the 1.3 billion people that are there are going to take this at some point or another? And they don't know what they're doing. What are the side effects? Do we have any idea at all? Absolutely not. So it'll at least, by the way, and it's why you're seeing certain stocks over that are affected by China and possibly the restrictions being pulled. I think that's why you're seeing some of those stocks rise to the upside, John, because they're at least getting out there, and they don't want to use any of the drugs from the U.S., but they'll start using these, and it might be able to reopen.
Yep. Well, let's hope, Pete.
Yeah.
Now, folks, beyond hope, we've got actual education, live trading for 2 days down in Miami. Check out the Miami Market Rebellion event that'll be going on December 8th through 10th. Jared, roll them.
Introducing our new series of intimate in-person trading conferences in some of the greatest cities in America. It's Market Rebellion Live. First up, this December in Miami. Level up your trading with help from Pete Najarian, AJ Monte, Ryan Mastro, and Bill Johnson. Miami is limited to just 25 seats to ensure every guest gets personal attention. So act now. Tickets are going fast.
Bang, we're back live. Folks, that's one of those events. Pete and I will both be there. It's 2 days of live trading. We have a great time talking one-on-one in a lot of cases, Pete, with people because it's only 25 people. This is not the 1,000-person event that we do in Vegas or the 300-person event that we just did down in Dallas. This is going back to teaching people how we trade, listening to some of their input about, hey, what's important to them and so forth. And we really do listen. And, every one of these has been sold out, Pete. I think we're down to our last 9 tickets now, folks. So make sure you check it out, marketrebellion.com/Miami. All right, Pete, let's dive into some of the unusual activity. I know that you were kind of leading me into this one, Pete, and that was LVS, Las Vegas Sands. And many of you know, of course, that they have the Venetian and so forth out in Las Vegas, and that's where they're headquartered still. But they've got the bulk of their exposure really over in Macau and Cotai. And the fact that China might be reopening, we were kind of poking fun at that inhalable vaccine. But if that's what it takes to get these places reopened, LVS would do pretty darn well. And somebody bought nearly 1 million share equivalent because they bought 9,900 of these calls. The next week, Friday, not this Friday, the 4th, but next week, the 11th of November, expiring 40 calls. And that was with the stock at 39. Doesn't take a big move for the stock to get there. Obviously, any confirmation out of China that, we are reopening, this thing, I think, Pete, pops to 42, 44, something like that, fairly quickly. So nearly 1 million share equivalent. So that'd be a $40 million trade, basically, if the person chose to exercise those calls. We can ride on those for $1, Pete. That's $100 per option. That's why I'm in it. And I'll start selling upside calls almost immediately against it.
Love it, John. I think it's smart, and I think it's even smarter because of the fact that you and I both know that there's another one of those, Win, who's seeing a little bit of upside as well. So maybe there is something to this whole inhalable deal that they've got going on over there. We'll see. But, John, I'm going to hit Google for you, and I'm not going to hit it in a positive way. I'm hitting this son of a gun in a negative way because that's been the direction Google has been going in. It's been going down, 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 hitting new 52-week lows, it feels like daily, including today. As a matter of fact, it was around 90, and I think it's maybe even slipped a little further down, at least as of right now, closer to maybe call it 89, John. But while it was trading around $90 near the lows of the day, we had a buyer of almost 3,000 of Friday. So it's only going to be today, Thursday, Friday. So you've got just a few days for this to work. But they bought 2,800 of the 86 puts. So if this stock continues in this decline to the downside, these puts were going for 23 cents to 27 cents. So call it 25 cents for these puts. Somebody out there thinks that this isn't over yet. There's still a little bit further to go, and it might even happen over the next couple of days. So very, very interesting trade to see that, John. They are not coming in buying calls saying, hey, you know what? We think there's a bounce coming. That's not it at all. They're just looking at even more downside for Google.
And a cheap shot, like you said,
Yep.
Pete, 23 cents. That means $23 per option to control a $90 stock. That's some interesting things. All right, Pete, let's talk a little bit about the NFL and trading deadline and so forth. What did you glean from the wires over the last couple days?
Well, and that's the best way to frame it, John, is it's not just of one single day, although the one single Tuesday is a new record in the NFL for the deadline, 10 trades. That doesn't happen in the NFL. I think what's going on, John, is when you look, and I talked to quite a few general managers just in the last 2 days, they're out there saying, you know what? It has to happen this year. We're not waiting and we're not going into the future. We think it's going to happen this year, so we're going to make some of these trades. You and I talked about that Philadelphia trade for the Bears defensive end. Then we talked about the linebacker going to Baltimore. They had 10 trades on Tuesday. What were some of the interesting ones? I'll tell you what. How about this? Buffalo is a 6-1 football team, and they went out and grabbed a running back and a cornerback and got rid of their starting running back in a trade. That was pretty interesting one. How about the Dolphins? They not only went out and found themselves a running back, but they went out and found themselves one of the best pass rushers in football. He doesn't have a huge number of sacks year in and year out, but John, he is a disruptor. And I'm talking about Bradley Chubb. You and I were talking about him the other day. They went out and made the trade. They got him. The Vikings went out because they continue to have problems with Irv Smith Jr. He's always hurt. He's a good tight end, but he's never around. We went right in the division, John, and went to Detroit and said, hey, look, we're going to take your tight end Hawkinson. What's it going to cost us? Here's the thing. Most of these trades that were made, they're getting third rounders and fourth and fifth rounders for all these guys that they think can make a difference now. And I think that's what made this so daggone interesting, John, is what's really going on and how are they doing it? And the trade for the, hey, look, it's Super Bowl this year. We're not looking 3 years out like I think your Chicago Bears might be, but we're looking this year. But I still think best trade of all the trades that I've seen, Christian McCaffrey, hands down. They picked him up about 10 days ago from Carolina. And John, the guy showed what he can do 10 days into it in that game this past weekend where he threw for a touchdown, ran for a touchdown, and caught a pass for a touchdown. That might be the best trade, I think, of all of them. But I like the fact that Miami's 5-3. They went out and did something. The Dolphins, at 5-3. Then you got the Bills at 6-1, and then you get the Vikings at 6-1, trying to make themselves even better. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's good for the fans too, Pete.
Yep.
Because the last thing you really want is just to kind of sit back. You mentioned the Bears. I can't believe that people will be packing and cheering like crazy in that stadium. They're this close, Pete, to putting paper bags over their heads again because, the management and the ownership has basically failed them yet again. And it's not exciting, fun football. There are flashes of it, but it's not like, you just described with the Vikings or with the Eagles or with the Bills. It's not like that at all. It's a lot more, sadly, like the Raiders.
Yeah.
All right. Anything in college football, Pete?
Yeah, we got something really fun, John. We got to kick this one around and see who you think are maybe the top four and who I think and who does the committee think it is, because they came out with it last night for college football. They've got Tennessee, number one. I think that was a bit of a shocker because they leaped all the way up there. But is it deserved? Oh, hell yeah, it is. They're 8-0. They've done everything right, John. They've beat a lot of ranked teams. You and I just talked about that the other day. They've got Ohio State 8-0. They're sitting at number 2. You've got Georgia 8-0. They're sitting at number 3. By the way, Tennessee's going to Georgia, so we're going to find out a little bit more about them. And then you've got Clemson. Now, what on God's green earth has Clemson done this year? I like Clemson. I love watching them play, but they ain't a great team this year. They're not the Clemson team that they've been, but they are undefeated. So, of course, because of reputation, they're sitting up there at number 4. Somehow, John, they've decided that they're a better team than Michigan, who's 8-0, who all they do is beat the living tar out of the people that they play and have one of the best defenses in all of college football. Then you got Bama sitting back there at 7-1, and they're right there, John. And I think there's a chance for them to get in. Well, here's where I put them. I got Tennessee number 1. I got Michigan not number 5. I got them number 2 because they can run the ball, and they've played a lot of different ranked teams, specifically Penn State, where they ran for over 400 yards on them. So yep. I think Michigan is the real deal this year. They got a decent quarterback. I'll put Georgia at 3, Ohio State at 4. But I'll tell you what, TCU is right there for me. They're sitting at 5, not 7, because all they've done so far, John, they beat SMU. They beat Oklahoma 55-24. They beat Oklahoma State, who was ranked very highly at the time. They beat Kansas State, who everybody seems to love now. Well, TCU is undefeated, and they beat them all. So at some point, those guys are going to find their way in if they continue to win out. What do you think? What's your top 4 right now, would you say?
Well, I like yours, Pete, in that order, in fact. But as you've said, there will be a flip at the top of this after this weekend because Tennessee does play Georgia in Athens, a difficult place, but every place is difficult. Yeah. Doesn't matter if it's Death Valley in Clemson or where it is, going to some hostile teams' home turf, especially when you have undefeated teams, is difficult. So this will be a great game. Everybody wants to see it. And like you said, this will cause one of those 2 teams, Tennessee or Georgia, to flip out of that top 5. And all of a sudden you've got the 4 that just have to hope for somebody. Everybody else is just hoping to get into that. But they might not get a chance if there are no more losses. But we do have playoffs. So, we will see. Playoffs.
That never gets old for me, man. That was still one of the greatest of all time.
that Pete and the former Stanford coach when he sat there saying, "They are who we thought they were."
God, that was one of the greatest of all time. I'm telling you, we've had some great coaches in the NFL, but those 2 moments were some of the absolute all-time greatest.
They sure were. All right, folks. Well, that's going to do it for us. We'll be back tomorrow. This is our first Wednesday show. Yep. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. So now we're 4 days a week. Make sure you tune in to Charles Payne and Making Money with Charles Payne at 2 p.m. Eastern time today, because I'll be on there. And we look forward to greeting all of you back here tomorrow. We'll see you then.